In this video, what we're going to do is go over how to set up a new gas metal arc welding or MIG machine fresh out of the box, like it's brand new. Now I don't have one that's fresh out of the box, it's brand new, so I ripped apart an old one and we're going to put it back together. And the machine I chose, you can look right here, it says power requirements, only goes to 220 volts. One of the main things you got to figure out before you buy a MIG machine is what are your power requirements where you're at. A lot of times people are doing this in their garage and they only have 110. That means you're going to have to get a 110 welder, right? Just plugs into a normal outlet. Those are okay machines, but they don't go to real thick steel. So if you want to get into thicker stuff, you really kind of got to get into 220. You might have to, rewire your garage, or some people have like an air compressor that runs on 220. They don't even know it. So you got to first figure out your power requirements, okay? So some machines you can jump back and forth from 220 to like 460. It all depends on what machine you choose to get. In my lab, I have both 220 and 460, so we try to get machines that do both 220 and 460, and we can jump them. And the way you jump them, I got another video, which I'll put in the card if you want to look that up to see how you can jump them. New ones, a lot of them, they jump themselves. They can sense what the power is coming in. But most people don't have brand new welders, so if you want to check out how to do the old way of jumping them, like I said, I'll put it in the card and you can check that video out. But the best thing to do is make sure you get the right machine for what power you have. So for sure, make sure you have the right power before you buy a machine. Wire diameters. So one of the variables, there's not a lot of variables to putting the machine together. There's basically two: wire diameters and shielding gas. That's what you have a choice of. Everything else is pretty much already set, right? So wire diameters, if you get a 110 machine, you're looking at probably an 023 and 030 wire. It's a really narrow wire because it doesn't have a lot of power to let that wire wet out as you're welding. At 220 and 460 setups, you're looking at 035 or 045 most of the time. The most common is 035. That's what we're going to be doing out there. And that's just the diameter of the wire, 035 of an inch, all right? Shielding gas. Not a lot of variation in the shielding gas. Most people are doing short circuits, so the wire comes down, makes direct contact with the weld pool, and that's how the weld starts, okay? The shielding gas for that, I'm just going to write it over here, is 75% argon, 25% CO2. There's other mixes you can get that are hotter, but for most people that are just doing things in their garage, they're just going to run 75-25. Even people in industry run 75-25. So very common shielding gas. And the way you get your shielding gas is you got to go to the local supplier and figure out the rules of how you get the bottles, okay? A lot of people say, I don't want to have a bottle, so they're going to run flux core out of it. The problem with flux core, if you don't use it all the time, the wire tends to corrode really quickly and becomes no good. So you got to take really good care of flux core wires. People don't want to take the bottle if they're doing portable stuff, so they get a 110, they think they're going to do it with the flux core, then they get there and it doesn't feed right because it's all rusty. My personal opinion, find a way to get the shielding gas. I do have one setup with flux core. That's all it is, and it's a 110 machine. I rarely use it. I actually use it sometimes just to get the wire to where it's clean. So not a lot of variables in machine setup as far as what you can do. You got to figure out your wire diameters and your shielding gas. The wire is going to be ER70S-6. I mean, there's other wires too, but 99% of the time it's ER70S-6. So my plan for this is we're going to go out, do a step-by-step video on how to put this together once it comes out of the box. Usually they show up, they have a power cord and the ground on them, and then the gun and the regulator and the shielding gas hose is usually inside the machine. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go out and we're going to start putting this machine back together. So here we are at the machine. I got an older machine because a lot of the new machines, they do a lot of stuff for you. So I wanted to use a little bit of an older machine so we can show you how a traditional method of setting up a MIG machine would go. When you get a MIG machine through the door, usually it's going to have the ground on it. So right here the ground's on it, so I left that on there. And if it's not on there, you just put it into the negative terminal. You're also going to usually have a power cord on it. I've got them before where there wasn't power cords on there. It all depends on where you get it. Usually there's a power cord though. Tools you're going to need. I usually have a pair of MIG pliers with me. I set this up and an 1 1/8" wrench. And last but not least, an 11/16 wrench. So the 1/8" wrench is going to go to your bottle, and this is going to go to your gas hookups. So what we're going to do now is take a look at the other stuff that goes on this machine that will usually be on the inside of the machine when you get it. We'll take a quick look at that, then we'll start building this machine up. So this is a look at the stuff that typically comes with the MIG welder when you get it. You're going to have the regulator, the gas hose, and then this is your gun right here. Alright, this spool of wire over here you're going to have to buy. And I'm going to take a look at the spool of wire here separately so you know which type of wire to buy. Alright, here's a look at the label on the wire. It's ER70S-6. Probably the most common MIG wire there is. We're using 035. This is a 44-pound spool. Here's another look at the wire. I just wanted to point out that it looks silvery in this video because it is silvery. And it is ER70S-6, but typically it comes and it looks gold. It has copper on the outside that protects it from rusting. So I wanted to point out that this is a silver looking wire, but it is ER70S-6. I actually called the supplier and they said it's got a different kind of coating on it, which I had never heard of before. So if you've heard of that, I don't know, put it in the comments because I've never heard of the wire being a silver color like this. It's always been gold, but it's something new. One other thing, the diameter of the wire, you got to figure out based off of how thick you want to go or how much metal you want to put down. If you're on a 110 welder, you're probably going to want like an 023 or an 030. Typically, short circuit on a 220 welder, you're going to want 035 diameter wire. And also, how big the spool is depends on how much you're going to be welding. If you're welding a lot, this 44-pound spool that I got will work great. But if you're going to weld a little bit here, a little bit there, you want to go to a smaller spool so it doesn't corrode when it's in the machine. So what we're going to do now is go into putting the gun into the machine. Alright, this is a look at the end of the gun. It's got that piece coming off on that little cord there. And there's the end that goes into the machine. And if you look up, there's a hole right there in the machine. We're going to stick this piece through that hole, right up into the drive rolls. And that little power cord that goes off to that little plastic thing goes into that plug right there. And there's usually a little notch that tells you which way the plug goes in. It fits in there. It has a way it fits in. So what we'll do now is get a shot of the drive rolls, and then we'll plug this baby in. So this is a shot of the drive rolls right here. You can see it's all the way up. It comes down like that, then that clamps on the wire there. The wire feeds through here into the actual gun conduit. So what I'm going to do now is put the gun conduit up to the drive rolls right here, then you tighten this down. That's how you tighten the gun into place. So I'm going to back this out, leave everything loose, and now I'll grab the actual gun and get it into place. Okay, so hopefully that gives you a good view of the hole that the gun goes through. So it comes through like this. There's a little groove it goes into. What I'm going to do now is shut the drive rolls because I want to get this conduit up as close as I can to the drive rolls. So we're right up in there. Tighten this, I guess it's a thumb screw down, and it's in there nice and tight, and we should be good to go. I'm going to loosen that up. So I'm going to show you the drive rolls here up close so you can get a good view of the drive rolls. Right after I plug in the electrical part of this. Alright, so the gun is secured. Now we got to plug in the electrical part, and you can see there's little grooves that line up a very particular way. So you got to line them up with the grooves, and then this just screws in right here. So we're going to do that, and then we'll pull the drive rolls out and you can get a good look at them. Alright, so I got it in with all the grooves, and then you just thread this in like this. And we're good to go. One last look at the front of the machine. I know the lighting was a little off there, I was like upside down, but so the gun is installed. Let's pull the drive rolls out real quick so you can see what they look like. Alright, just pull the drive rolls out. And you can see it says 035 on it. That's the diameter wire we're using. You want smooth drive rolls for MIG wire. If they're knurled, they'll have little grooves in them. That's for flux core. So You want smooth driver rolls, and I will flip them up so you can see what I mean by that. Alright, I had to go dig out some knurled ones. The one on the left is knurled. The two I just pulled out of the machine are on the right, and you can see the grooves are smooth. So you want smooth drive rolls, not knurled like the one on the left. The one on the left is for flux core. The way you put these on is they got these little ears. You just line them up with the proper grooves, slide them on, and then you turn this, and it clicks in to lock it into place. And then you do the same thing on the top one. Now it's time to add your wire. Let me zoom in here a little bit. One thing I was going to mention. When you put your wire in, there's usually a certain way it goes. This, you just pinch, pull that off to allow the wire to go on. There's a little nub right here though. So you got to line your wire up with the nub. The other thing you got to look at is, does the wire come off the top of the roll or the bottom of the roll? And you can see it feeds down like this into the wire feed system. So it's going to go off the top of the roll. So you want to make sure your wire is coming off the top when you put it in there. So I'm going to grab the wire and we'll start this feeding process. Okay, so I got my MIG pliers ready. I got the nub in the right spot. Slide that on. Make sure it's gripping the nub. Put this back on. What I'll do is I'm going to cut this wire to feed it. If you let the wire go, it's going to go ballistic. You'll lose your whole roll of wire. You got to make sure that you hold on to this while you're doing it. I'm going to focus on the drive roll area to show you how to thread it in there here in the next shot, so that's what we're going to move into. So I'm pulling the wire off. I'm going to snip it. I'm going to go through here, through the drive roll system, then you guide it into that conduit. Sometimes it can be a little difficult. There it goes. So we got it going into the conduit, and I like to get it in enough to where it's well into the gun that it's not going to snag anything. So I got it in there, and you're going to pull this down, pull your drive roll down, lock it into place. Now it can't go anywhere. You can let go of it and it won't go ballistic. What we're looking at here is the gas bottle. And I guess I went over the gases on the board, but with short circuit MIG welding, you're going to use 75% argon, 25% CO2. This is a big bottle. Usually you got to pay rent on big bottles. If you want to not pay rent, you got to go to your local welder supplier and then find out what they do where you're at. Where I'm at, you got to pay rent on these. The small ones, you can do a 99-year lease on them, so you can kind of buy them. Depends on how much welding you're going to do. If you're going to do a lot of welding, you want a big bottle. If you're not going to do that much welding, you can get away with a smaller bottle. The disadvantage of the smaller bottle is you got to change the bottles over a lot more often than when you do with one of these big ones. But let me zoom in on the label so you can see the gas. So here we are zoomed in on it, and you can see right here it says 75% argon, 25% CO2. I'm going to throw this bottle on the back of the welder. Remember, lift with your legs, not with your back. These are very heavy. If you can't do it, get help. This is why welders all have hernias, these bottles right here. So I'm going to throw that on there, and that's just as simple as lifting and putting it on there. And then we'll get a look at it, and we'll go from there. Once you have your bottle on the welder, you must secure the chain around it. You have the chain secured, you can take the cap off. You never take the cap off unless it's chained up. That's how a disaster happens. So we're going to take the cap off now. Well, maybe some of them can be a bit tricky. Sometimes you got to tap them, you put pliers in here or whatever you got to do. Now we're ready for the regulator. All right, regulators, mount up. So just take this, screw it in. I like to put the regulator on before the gas hoses go on the machine, because then it stiffens up this upper joint right here. don't know if that makes sense. But otherwise you have to do it in your hand. You might not get it tight enough and things like that. And don't tighten the ever-loving daylights out of it. This is how they become stripped out. Get your 1/8" wrench. I usually snug it, back it off into the place where I'm at, and snug it again. We're going to do a leak test anyway, so don't tighten the ever-loving daylights out of it. And you can see the gauges are facing the wrong way, right? So I'm going to have to spin this bottle to make sure they're facing towards where you're going to be when you're welding. So we'll start up top here. I spun the bottle. Screw in the gas hose. This is where your 11/16 wrench comes in. Snug it up. Nice and tight. Don't strip it. Doesn't have to be tightened up to the point where you're going to strip it, because we're going to do a leak test anyways. So now we're going to take this and go to the machine. Alright, so that's the gas inlet to the machine. And again, just bring it down here, screw it in. You really want to make sure this one, or the gas hose, doesn't leak, because you're only going to do this one time. Once you put it on the regulator and put it in the machine, you're never going to take it off again, most likely, because you're just going to change the regulator at the bottle, right? So again, tighten this one up. This one you can get some decent torque on because it goes to the machine. Again, don't tighten the ever-loving daylights out of it. We're about to leak test it right now anyways. Alright, so I just plugged in the machine, it lit up. And when you feed the wire the rest of the way, you can see there's the ground, I got that going to the table. But then the stinger lead, I got it all nice and straight. Alright, you don't want to have a lot of kinks in it when you're feeding the wire through. And I opened up the machine so that I can see the roll move. If it stops moving, I know I got a problem. One last thing to look at before we feed the wire the rest of the way through. So here's a look at the gun. When you're feeding the wire through, you want to take your gas cup off and your contact tip. It can catch right here on this contact tip. What I'm going to do now is straighten this out and run the wire. So now I'm going to straighten out the stinger, or the gun. Sorry, stinger is kind of a slang term. I'm going to straighten it right out. I'm going to keep the camera on the actual roll. And then I'm going to pull the trigger. And I'm going to watch that roll the whole time. And when the wire comes out, I'm going to stop pulling the trigger, trim it, we're going to be ready to go. But you want to make sure you can see that roll in case it stops moving. That means that something snagged up. Usually that happens right in the gun. I can feel it coming out the gun. Alright. There's the wire. Alright, so here we are at the gun again. Put your contact tip back in. Get the wire there. Finger tighten it. Grab your MIG pliers. Just snug it. Snug it. Put the cup back on. Snip your wire to about 1/4 of an inch. We're almost ready. Now we just got to do our leak detecting solution on the gas, and we'll be ready. Before we do the leak test on this bottle, I turn the bottle on. You want to make sure gas is coming through here. Here you can hear it. That means there's gas in all the lines. So we'll go ahead and do the leak test now. Okay, so we got the bottle hot. It's coming out the gun. So we're gonna get some soapy water. Usually I just use a pop bottle with a hole drilled in the top. Make sure you use plenty of soap. And then you take the soap, and wherever you're looking to see if it leaks, you put the soap around it. No bubbles, we're good to go. This is the hose that we added. No bubbles, we're good to go. So now I'm going to go to the one on the machine. I'm not going to film that because you get the idea. And also your setting on your gas should be about 30 CFH, cubic feet per hour. That's where I usually start. So we're all set up. Let's look at the settings on the machine real quick, and then we'll try and strike an arc with this. Last thing you got to do before you can weld is put in the settings that you want. On a MIG machine, there's two settings: wire feed speed and voltage. There's usually cheat sheets that you can start with. That's where I got these numbers, and you just line up 035, 75, 25 is the gas, and you go over your material thickness, and what is it saying this is for 1/8 inch, 17.4, 230 is for 1/8 inch steel. So I'm going to grab some 1/8 inch, and we'll see if this thing runs. Alright, so we'll do a little test speed real quick, and it is 90 degrees out, so I can't wait to get out of here. Let's fire this baby up. Beautiful. So that wraps up how to put together a MIG machine right out of the box. Thanks for watching, subscribing to TV Weld, and hopefully you have a good idea on how to get a MIG welder going once you buy one.